that existed in those days.
One of the great trial lawyers, in my view, the last century was African-American named Irving Andrews.
Yes, indeed.
You have a long and wonderful history with Irving, but did it start when you went over across the street to watch him try a case?
Actually, I mean, I knew who he was, and I went over there and saw him, but the way that we met was a little bit different. I was living in an apartment with my wife, and during the first quarter, DU Law School was on a quarter system, and we had this apartment, and across the street was a Unitarian church, and the minister there on the roadside, isn't that what they call it, the roadside pulpit or something, to show what they were doing, and he was giving a series of sermons on capital punishment.
Irving was?
No, the minister was a guy named Richard Henry. So I went over there on a Sunday to hear his sermon on capital punishment, and Irving was there. And I went up and introduced myself, and I said, "Are you a Unitarian?" He said, "No, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm interested in capital punishment." And so we chatted then, and then when I'd go back down into the city and county building and he would be trying a case, I would always stop and say hello to him and see him. And this was the 1958, 59, the civil rights movement was just starting to boil up, and there was a lot of activity in Denver with civil rights groups, the Congress of Racial Equality, and this is before the big breakup where the Weathermen and the Black Panthers started. This was the nonviolent Gandhian approach of Martin Luther King. And Irving was very active in the NAACP, and he, in fact, along with quite a few other lawyers, when the NAACP Legal Defense Fund was doing its briefs on Brown versus the school board, they sent their briefs out to different lawyers for comment, and Irving was one of those that they had done. He was at that time I think the national board representative from Colorado, Wyoming. So he suggested that I join the NAACP, and I did. And then after a while, I graduated, and I went up to Brighton, Colorado, and I was with a firm there, and I was still coming into Denver and working as a volunteer on civil rights matters. And at one point, while I was there, I also was a part-time deputy district attorney in Brighton, and Irving had a partner named Bob Rohn, and Bob broke his leg and got an embolism and died. And so I got
essentially 1962 now?
This is 1962, end of 61, 1962. And I went straight through law school. So I graduated from college in 58. And then because it was on the quarter system, I went summers as well. And so I started in September of 58, and I graduated in December of 60. So then I took the bar in February of 61 and was admitted to practice in April of 61 when the bar results came out. And at that point, that's when I went up to Brighton. And so I'd been up there about a year. So that must have been 62. And I got a call from Irving's then wife, Evelyn, saying that Bob had died. And so I went down there immediately to their office to see if I could do something to help. And there were so many people there. It was a practice they were more of a legal aid society than the legal aid society was, and there was no public defender. So they were talking to clients 65, 70 a day, and a long line coming out into the street to their office. And a lot of it was just very minor stuff, traffic violations, petty misdemeanors, but every now and then there was a felony there, and there were also some divorces and other things that poor people encounter. And the majority of the clients were African American, but there were Caucasians there, there were Hispanics there as well. And so I just started in on that day talking to these people one at a time and writing down what they had and so on, and when they had to go to court, et cetera. And so I went back to the firm in Brighton and said I wanted to take 2 weeks vacation. And the senior partner there said, "Oh, great, where are you going to go?" And I said, "Well, my friend Bob Rohn died, and I want to go down and help him in his practice in Irving." And he said, "Oh, you can't do that." He said, "Tell them to get one of their own." And
what did that mean to you? What did you take that to mean?
well, I think I didn't take it so much as being racist as I did a Denver lawyer handling criminal cases, because the firm in Brighton, we did real estate work and represented irrigation companies and school districts. And so I think, I don't think he was, I don't think he meant it as a racist thing, but he just said, tell them to get one of their own. And so I just said, well, I am one of their own. And I quit. And I went down with Irving, and after about, I don't know, 6-8 weeks, we decided to form a partnership. And so we formed Andrews and Kane, which was incidentally the first racially integrated law practice in the state of Colorado.
This is 1962?
63.
63.
Yeah. So I stayed there,